So far, we have briefly covered the PEO assessment and also the PO assessment. In these videos, we're going to talk about the CO assessment. If you look at the model here, you know that CO assessment, it will be direct assessment. We can acquire data from the students' performance and results, analyze them in order to determine the attainments of the course outcome. In terms of the assessment, there are formative assessment and summative assessment. Both are assessment. Both will give you result in terms of the student's performance. However, the purpose differ. First, let us look at the formative assessment. This is the assessments of students' progress throughout a course. The formative assessment can be carried out anytime within the semester. When you are conducting the formative assessment, you will need to provide feedback to the students for the learning activities in order to improve the students' performance. The ultimate goal of the formative assessment, it will be for performance enhancement. Some examples of the formative assessment include progress tests, assignment, presentations, and etc. This formative assessment is important to you and to the students. You want to know the status of the students, whether they can cope with the learning activities. At the same time, students would like to know their performance and conditions. Where are the areas of improvements? Where are the mistakes and errors? Therefore, the formative assessment is normally conducted within the semesters, where there should be discussions and feedbacks given by the lecturers after the assessment. The other type of assessment, it will be the summative assessment. This is the assessments of the learning which summarize the progress of the learner at a particular time. It is used to assign the learner a course grade. Now, the goal of the summative assessment is for performance assessment. The summative assessment is different from the formative assessment, as it normally conducted at the end of the semester. We want to know how well the students perform after completing the course. Since it is conducted after the course have completed, there will be little or no teaching and learning activities after the summative assessment. You will not expect any feedbacks from the lecturers, except for the grades of the course. The examples of summative assessment include final exam, capstone project, where the students' works are submitted at the end of the semester for final grading in terms of their performance after undertaking the course. A typical course should have both formative and summative assessment. You need the formative assessment to help students to improve. This increases the chance of the students meeting the requirements and the standards as defined by the course. As for the summative assessment, you need it to conclude the performance of the students. Normally, we will have a thorough assessment as the summative assessment. This helps us to identify the weaknesses of the students, give us some ideas that attention should be put into the relevant scopes of topics in future. These are the types of assessment. Now let us talk about how specifically we can do the assessments for CO. You need to bear in mind the golden triangle here. We want to do the assessment for CO. That means there should be one assessment designated for one CO. Now, if you have 3 course outcomes, you will have a series of assessments for those course outcomes. Based on the concept of the golden triangle, you will need to also plan your teaching and learning activity purposely designated for the specific course outcome. So let us talk about a bit how this can be incorporated within a course. Normally, before the semester start, lecturer will need to submit their teaching plan. In their teaching plan, not only that the lecturer need to plan the schedules and sequence of topic being delivered in the class, the lecturer will also need to plan the teaching and learning methods. Since we discrete everything to COs, and you know that the CO can be of the nature of cognitive, psychomotor, and affective, the teaching and learning activities may not be the same across the board. Let's say now if the CO is cognitive in nature, lecture and tutorial can be used to assist students achieving the respective course outcome. What if the course outcome is psychomotor or affective? Probably the lectures and tutorial may not be suitable. Therefore, you may require a good variety in terms of the teaching and learning methods. These are some examples. We have lecture, tutorial, assignment, presentations, computer-based learning, project supervisions, research, and other student-centered learning. Different institutions or different programs may have different formats of doing this, but the principle is there. You will need to discrete your teaching and learning methods in accordance to the respective COs. Later, you will need to design for the assessment strategy. This is when you plan for your CO assessment. The assessment should always in line with the teaching and learning activities. Normally, we plan both at the teaching plan level. Now, the assessment strategy will be very much dependent on the natures of that particular CO, whether it is cognitive, psychomotor, or affective. If the CO is cognitive based, progress tests and the final exam will be relevant. Now, if it is skill based, you might require other type of assessment. There should be a good variety in terms of the assessment strategies. We have progress tests, assignment report, presentations, evaluations, fieldwork reports, lab reports, other evaluation methods, and final examinations. While designing for the teaching and learning activities as well as the assessment method, you should always check with the course documents, especially the weightage of the assessment. It should not be too significantly deviated from the course document. Nevertheless, lecturers are always given flexibility in terms of designing the teaching and learning methods as well as the assessment strategies. It is not fully fixed, as we don't want to restrain everything to the traditional delivery methods. Lecturers are highly encouraged to venture into the other student-centered learning. And if you are adopting the student-centered learning, that you find the final examinations and progress tests might not be fully applicable, you are also free to have other evaluation methods. This one will require the consent of your CQI committee as well as your head of the program. The bottom line here is, teaching plan is not something rigid. There are flexibility given to the lecturer, which will encourage creativity in terms of the teaching and learning activities. As for the assessment strategy, they are also not fully fixed. You are free to decide which assessment strategy is more appropriate for you to acquire the reliable results. Now let us talk about the amount or the variety in terms of the teaching and learning methods as well as the assessment methods. Normally, we will encourage a good variety for both of them. While planning for those, you can consider to have at least 2 teaching learning methods and at least 2 assessment strategies. If possible, those teaching and learning methods as well as the assessment strategy can be of different nature. This can reduce the bias caused by some students who may not be able to perform under certain assessment method, which actually the students can do well under different assessment method. Also, there may be strengths and weaknesses of different students. Some prefer the traditional methods. Some students prefer the student-centered learning methods. It would be good if you have a good mixture in terms of the teaching and learning methods as well as the assessment strategies. Now that you have planned your assessment strategy here, you should carry out the assessment as what you have planned. Let's say now you conduct a progress test at the mid of the semester. Based on what you have planned, the progress test will constitute 20 marks. 5 marks should go for CO1, while 15 marks should go for CO2. Therefore, when you design your progress test, you should assign the marks accordingly. Total marks 20 marks, 5 marks for CO1, and 15 marks for CO2. You will have a list of the students, mark their papers, acquire their result as the data. Then you will know each student how much they score in CO1 and CO2. What you see here, the test questions are developed and analyzed on the basis of COs. The second assessment that you design in your teaching plan is assignment. A total of 20 marks is assigned. 5 marks should go for CO2. 15 marks go for CO3. Now when you come to the assignment, you are likely having difficulty in doing the direct measurements in terms of the student's performance. With that, you may require rubrics to make your evaluations objectives. You will need to define the criteria of your assessment. What are the essential things that you want to evaluate within the assignment? Those criteria should closely in line with your COs, as your assessment is always focusing on the COs. Therefore, there should be mapping of your criteria in the rubrics to the COs. When it comes to the rating, you will need to clearly define the performance criteria so that you are able to identify those perform well and those do not perform well. And then you calculate the marks. Based on the mapping of the criteria and the COs, ultimately, you will get 5 marks for CO2 and 15 marks for CO3. Remember, we mentioned about you need at least 2 assessment strategies for each COs. In this case, for CO1, we will have progress tests and final exam. The coursework covers 40%, while the final exam covers 60% here. As for CO2, we have 3 assessment methods: progress test, assignment, and also final exam. As for CO3, we have assignment and the final exam. Now, the coursework here are normally formative assessment. As for the final exam, it is a summative assessment. Formative assessments are normally conducted during the semesters. You should provide feedback to the students in order to help them to improve their performance. Normally, their scopes are narrower. which in this case, progress test cover the CO1 and CO2, while assignment cover CO2 and CO3. As for the final exam, it is a summative assessment. If possible, you will have to have the summative assessment on a more thorough manner. Therefore, in this case, final exam will cover all the COs. This is just an example how the teaching plan is constructed. You may design your own teaching and learning methods as well as the assessment strategy based on your own justifications. Now, if we talk about the final examinations, we will still design our exam questions in accordance to the COs. Since this final exam is designated to cover all 3 COs, later when you design for your final exam, all 3 COs should be covered. Now, the marks as acquired from the exam questions shall be collected and classified under different COs. We will be able to determine the attainment status of the students by different COs. After you have acquired all the results from the students, the progress test, assignment, as well as the final exam, every single assessment is designed in accordance to the COs. You can now group the results in accordance to the respective COs. Based on the teaching plan here, CO1 will have 5% for the progress test, and you will have question 1 and question 2 for final exam mapped to CO1. Now, when you analyze the CO attainment, there will be progress test 5% and final exam question 1 and question 2. As for CO2 here, 15 marks progress test, 5 marks assignment, and there will be final examinations. Final examinations, you have question 3 and question 4. Therefore, you will see CO2 here having the progress test, assignment, and final exam question 3 and question 4. Same goes to CO3, assignment and final exam questions. Now you have a list of the students. The data are all well in place. Based on the overall performance of the students under different COs, you will be able to determine the attainments of the COs. You can define a target. Let's say you want 80% of the students here perform well under the COs in order to confirm that the respective teaching and learning activities are helpful to the students. If the overall result here is not favorable, then you will know that certain CO are not well delivered. With that, later when come to the CQI, you may need to look into the reasons for non-attainment. Is it mainly due to the final exam? Is it due to the progress test? Or is it due to the assignment? Let's say now you identify the problem is in the final exam. You can further discrete them into the topics as assessed within the final exam questions. With that, you should be able to pinpoint where are the problems of the students. Now, knowing the problems of the delivery, you can propose for improvement to be executed in the next semester in order to help students better understanding the respective scope or topic. These are the recommendations when you are conducting the CO attainment analysis. First, you need to classify the assessment by the COs. This needs to be planned ahead at the teaching plan levels. That means you are planning everything before the semester starts. and then preferably to have more than 2 assessments per COs, which in this case you have 3 assessments in CO1, 4 assessments in CO2, and 2 assessments in CO3. Or if you would like to define by the assessment tools, you have progress test and final exam, 2 assessment methods. You have progress test, assignment and final exam, 3 assessment methods. You have assignments and final exam, 2 for the CO3. The purpose of having a good variety in terms of the course outcome assessment, it is to prevent bias, and it is for the cross-checking purposes. Of course, you can have as many assessments as you like within a course. The more assessment you have under each CO will lead to the additional works in collecting the data as well as keying results later. Now the question is, how refined you would like it to be? Since we are focusing on the CO, we want to know whether students can fulfill those COs. The assessment should be just enough for you to acquire good result, helping you to identify the problem of the course. You don't have to go into very refined levels in terms of the assessment. Also, at the same time, your motivation is not to minimize your workload. Since that you don't want to collect as many data, you want to minimize your assessment. You have 1 assessment for CO1, 1 assessment for CO2, and 1 assessment for CO3. Now you will have problem when you encounter situations of non-attainment. How can you pinpoint where are the problems when it is not refined enough? Therefore, you will need to strike a balance in between the numbers of assessment as well as the good results as you acquired from the CO attainment analysis. One more thing, it doesn't necessarily that when you see all COs are fulfilled is always better. It may also due to the reason that the analysis is not sensitive enough to identify the weakness and the problems of your course. You know that no course is perfect. There is no perfect mechanism of teaching and learning. It is okay when you are able to identify the weaknesses in relative to the other COs, such as this. Then you will be able to know where are the room for improvements. Another thing is about the student learning time. Theoretically, how much time you spend on each CO should have more or less similar amounts of mark being assigned to the COs. This is in line with the golden triangles. From the practical point of view, this may not always be achievable. At least you take the SLT as a guideline for you to do some tuning in terms of the SLT that you spend with respect to the CO, as well as the marks allocated for different COs. This shall involve process of tuning and fine-tuning. Next, you will require a mechanism to quantify the attainments of the COs. Don't put the standards too high, that all the COs are not attained. Neither should you put the standards too low, that all the COs are attained. And normally the respective mechanisms are defined at the program level. Now, if you find that your assessment now is continuously not sensitive enough for you to identify the problems, as well as the focus of improvements, you will need to provide feedbacks to the CQI committee to further fine-tune the quantifying mechanism. Now, when we want to quantify the attainments of the COs, the proper definitions of the attainment status, whether it is attained or not attained, If possible, it should represent the majority. It is only when a majority of students can score well under respective COs, we can confidently say that that particular CO is well achieved and well delivered. However, when the attainment status is defined by the minority, we have difficulty to omit the attainments by chance. Now, how do you define the majority? Some say 80%, some say 75%, some say 2/3, or simple majority, which is more than 50%. Now, this quorum here, whether it is 50% or 80%, it is very much subjected to the sensitivity of the measurement. Different university, different program, even different CQI committee may use different quorum. It is not the number that we are looking at. The focus now will be, we will need to test the sensitivity of the measurement, where the respective quorum here should be just good enough for us to identify the strengths and weaknesses of the delivery of the course. Let's say 80% of attainments by the students as implemented by one university. It may not be applicable for the other university, especially when the assessment strategy differs significantly. Therefore, it will be the responsibility of the CQI committee to look into this, doing some trial and errors, and finally decide on the suitable definitions of the attainment status of the COs.